Tom Moore from Vikefans.com, and today I'm joined by a man who's legendary on the football field as an NFL Hall of Fame defensive tackle, but he might be better known for his nearly 25-year tenure in the justice system, where it culminated with him becoming a justice on the Minnesota Supreme Court. I'm pleased to welcome former Minnesota Viking Alan Page to the show. Alan, thanks for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me.
Not a problem. I got to tell you, you're a year into retirement now, and I know so many retirees who spend their days sitting around watching The Price is Right on television, but you almost seem to be more active these days than when you were on the Supreme Court. What exactly does retirement look like to you?
Well, I'm still trying to figure out what it looks like. It certainly isn't sitting around watching The Price is Right. In fact, we've had our television on here for about 15 minutes the other day, and that was the first time we've had it on all summer. There's just a lot going on, involvement with the Page Education Foundation. I've been doing some speaking. I've been speaking with young kids. I was at the fair last week. Just a lot going on.
Well, I got to tell you, it's one of those things to where it sure is a lot better to participate in life than to watch it go by, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I can't imagine what it would be like if I didn't have, any number of activities to keep me occupied. I think I would go a little bit crazy.
As I look towards retirement, maybe in the next 10 or 15 years, one of the visions I always have is maybe my alarm clock gets set at 7 o'clock instead of 5:30. It's my understanding yours is still set somewhere around 5 o'clock. Why do you get up so early, and what do you do early in the morning?
Ours is set at 5:19. Don't ask me why it's 19 and not 20, but that's just where it is. We get up every morning and go out and get our exercise in. We started that really about almost 40 years ago, getting up and going out and exercising, getting, for the most part, the best part of the day. And when I stopped working, it just didn't seem to make sense to change it. The later you get up in the day, the less of the day you have. So we try to capture it all.
You're probably pretty popular with the dogs, too. I understand you're carrying biscuits around with you.
I do. I carry dog treats when we go out to the lake. I've got a whole host of doggy friends who look for me every day. They would be more than a little upset if I changed my routine.
I'll bet so. And you talk about the varied interests you have in what you're doing, and there's really no end to what we could talk about. But the one thing that's really foremost in my mind right now is the work you and your wife, Diane, are doing with the Page Educational Foundation. And I know you started that in 1988, and at that time your goal was, and it still is, to help provide the financial and mentoring assistance the students of color need, to encourage them not only to go to college, but really almost as importantly to be active participants and volunteering in the community. And I know you've got a big event coming up. It's really the first private event coming up at U.S. Bank Stadium on September 10th. And I wonder if you can tell listeners what the Page Education Foundation is hoping to accomplish at the event.
Well, we raise about a third, maybe a little bit more of our budget every year at our annual gala. And it's a great party. It's, there's a silent auction. There's you can bid on wines. You can, I think there's even some Vikings Packers tickets that are available. But, it's just a wonderful party. It's not a sit-down dinner. It's more of a mixer where you can come as early or as late as you want and stay as long as you want. And I haven't tried any of the food yet, but as I understand, it's pretty good. It's a good variety of ballpark food.
If people don't know it, the big issue here is, your inception. More than 6,500 students have gotten grants here, and you've always been a huge advocate of children, getting them involved early. I like to call it when they're bright-eyed, that first, second, third grade when they saw the wonder of the world about them. Talk to the listeners about why that's so important to get them engaged early.
Well, evidence shows that if children get to fourth grade and aren't excited about school, they're not likely to. The die is cast by then, so the earlier you get them excited, the better. And the other thing is, in those early ages, I've spent a lot of time in schools and classrooms across the country for over the last 40 years. And when you're in a first, second, third grade class, children are curious. They're excited. And, by the time they get to sixth, seventh, eighth grade, too many of them have lost that curiosity. And the goal, one of the goals of the Page Foundation is to have our Page Scholars work with young children, kindergarten through eighth grade, to keep that curiosity, that excitement, that interest going for, throughout their educational careers. And when we do that, we change the future, not only for them, but for all of us. We make the future better. We give young people hope that they have a stake in what's going on around them. And Martin Luther King Jr. once said, when people have a stake in society, they want to protect it. When they don't have a stake, when they don't feel they have a stake, they unconsciously want to destroy it. And so it just seems to make sense to me that we should be doing everything we can to keep that hope and that excitement and that interest in the community going for young people.
No doubt. I'll tell you the thing that I really like, and I didn't really realize it until you just said it, is the fact that you have the recipients of the foundation support. They're actually going back. So as they're still in school, going back and getting the other kids excited about it to kind of follow their path as role models.
Absolutely. That's a key component for us. In fact, while the grants that we give are important, what is really important is having our grant recipients, we call them Page Scholars, by the way, having our Page Scholars work with young children, kindergarten through eighth grade, sending to those young children the strong, clear message that education is a tool that they are using and that the young children can use to achieve whatever their hopes and dreams are.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, one of the things that's exciting, there's a couple of people we've talked to that have backgrounds with the Vikings, and, it'd be Randall McDaniel and Chuck Foreman, both, after their career was over, have spent the time in the educational system. Randall's currently working with special needs children in his role right now. And it's nice to see people make that transition.
Randall is just an incredible soul. He's phenomenal, and I get excited every time I see him, because he is working with children in ways that makes things better for all of us.
His wife is a big part of that, too.
Oscar Reed, he has worked with, and Jim Marshall have worked with young people. In fact, Oscar, every year, he would have a group of kids that he would bring over to the Supreme Court, just so they could see something that was maybe foreign to them, something that they had no idea what it was about, but they could come and see it and have the sense that, oh, this is something that maybe I could do.
And it matters because, again, they look up to them. They're looking for somebody to give them that mentorship. And, as you look at that, the interesting part about, as you look at your career, it changes all the time, and I'm sure it's going to continue to change. There were two things that popped out as I did a little research on you, Alan. And one was, after all you did, background in sports, background in the justice system, I see maple syrup maker. And I got to ask you on this one, how did you make that leap, and what got you started doing that?
Well, speaking of maple syrup, there's going to be maple syrup in the silent auction at the gala.
Is it yours?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, great.
Maple syrup that Diane and I made. We started on the sugaring. Oftentimes people call it sugaring. We started sugaring about 4 years ago. Diane just decided that she wanted to give it a try. She had some friends who had been doing it, and turns out we have a cabin up north that has some maple trees, and so we thought we'd give it a try. And that first year we tapped, I think, 13 trees, not knowing anything about what we were doing, and turned out some pretty good maple syrup. It's a fascinating process. You gather the sap, you boil the sap, and when you're done, you have maple syrup.
See, there's your science background coming in.
Well, I think it's magic. I'm not sure it's science. Because you collect the sap, and the sap is pretty much like water when it comes out of the tree. And it takes a lot of sap. It takes about 40 gallons of sap to make a gallon of syrup. But you boil it down and boil it down, and it starts to change color. Texture or the viscosity of the liquid changes. And after a while, you have maple syrup. And it literally is magic.
Well, all I know is there are people up in the woods in Minnesota who are going to be carrying backpacks with pancakes in them, hoping they can try to stop by and get some syrup.
Well, we've got the syrup.
There you go. Now, the other thing I saw in researching your background, Alan, is something that appeals maybe more to the male side of our audience, more so than the female side, and that's that you're an automobile lover of sorts. And, I know that I always wanted a 1972 red Corvette. That's the last one that came out with the steel bumper. And now, I don't have that car yet, but if we were to walk outside of your garage and your dream car was there, what would we see?
What would you see? It would be a Ferrari of some sort.
Now, would that be a classic Ferrari or a new one?
It would be a classic. Probably a 365 GTB.
And is that still on the want list for you, or is that just something you'll leave? Maybe your grandchildren will get it.
I think the grandchildren will have to get that. And I should tell you, we have been, over the years, very fortunate. Diane's father has a series, or had a series of Buicks in his basement when I met her. And when I say he had like 5 or 6, if you can imagine 5 or 6 Buicks in the basement, ranging from 1906 up to, I think, a 1915.
Wow.
And they were all the first time I visited her parents, they take me down to the basement, and it's full of these cars, only the cars are in pieces. Her father was a master craftsman in terms of woodworking, and he was restoring each one of them. And we've been fortunate enough to have been given 2 of them. One is the 1906 Buick Model F, and the other one is a 1910 Model 10 Toy Tonneau. And the fact is that as much as I lust after a vintage Ferrari, driving these old brass era cars is, I suspect, more challenging, more interesting, and in many ways just as much fun.
It's funny that you mentioned that. I was growing up, my dad, as a project for my brothers and I to keep us out of trouble, teach us something about working on cars. He got a 1927 Model T, not operational, had the original motor, but needed a lot of work on it. And it was a lot of fun to build that. And, you never get that thing over 40 miles an hour necessarily, but it literally was working on, one engine block. It was a 1-cylinder engine. It was a challenge to drive, almost with a gear shift on the top versus a pedal. But yet it was fascinating to see how the technology came about and has evolved over the years.
Oh, absolutely. We take our Buicks. There's a ride from, it's called the Old Car Run, from New London to New Brighton, Minnesota. It's about 120 miles. And then you leave New London about 7 in the morning, and if you're lucky, your car gets you to New Brighton about 4:30, 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And when you're done, you've had a full day.
Sure.
You've had excitement. You've had adventure. These cars can be challenging to drive, especially in modern traffic. It can be a day's worth of joy.
Yes, and you certainly realize when they're older like that where they got the term horsepower. They weren't driving much faster than the horse was.
They weren't going much faster than the horse were, but they go far faster than you think you really should be going in one.
That's exactly right. No airbags back then, for sure.
Absolutely. I don't know how they did it back then with the roads they had.
That's true. Well, I'll tell you what, the Minnesotans, they recall fondly all these days that you were on the gridiron. But a few, certainly they know you're in the Hall of Fame, but they don't know you were actually part of history in the Hall of Fame when you were part of a construction team that helped build that when you were a teenager. What did you do there? How'd you get the job, and what did you do at the Hall of Fame?
Well, one summer, and I can't remember, it was my summer, I think it's maybe the summer between my senior in high school and freshman year in college, I was working for a construction company that had a major project at the Hoover Vacuum Cleaner Company. They were putting up a new building, and I spent a lot of time there sweeping floors. That was the extent of my skill. And they also were a subcontractor on the Hall of Fame construction site. And, I didn't spend a lot of time there, maybe a week, and I can't remember whether it was pushing a broom or it may have been holding a jackhammer. But it is kind of interesting that it turned out that I spent a little time there. Like I said, it wasn't a lot of time. It wasn't a major part of my summer's work, but I did spend some time there working.
No, it's another one of those neat detours on the roadmap of life. And before, you were the only defensive player to earn the MVP for the entire NFL in 1971. I also understand you were a bit of a musician in high school. And a lot of guys out there always had that one guy in high school where, he could play the guitar and got all the attention from the ladies. So I got to ask you, Alan, did you ever pull that tuba out at social events to wow the crowd?
No, I never did. Actually, it's another one of those legends. I mean, I was in the junior high and high school band my first year, but I was a tuba player or the sousaphone player. I wasn't, the best sousaphone player in the world, and my career didn't last long. But I had enough fun with it. That I went out, actually it was a year or two before I joined the court, I went out and bought an old sousaphone, and I still got it, and I don't know that I could call myself, or it would be fair to say that I played it now. I do a good job of making noise with it now.
Well, you know what? That's courageous.
Well, I'm not sure whether courageous or crazy, but we have fun with it.
Well, think about it this way. You hear a lot of people say, so-and-so is going to play the piano, somebody's going to play the guitar. Here comes Al on the sousaphone. You don't hear that much, so that's kind of a treat.
Well, that's true. In fact, we had the foundation had an event this summer, Doggy Jog, and they had this New Orleans-style brass band. And I got encouraged to bring the sousaphone out to participate with them. Mm-hmm. And I don't think I messed them up too much.
Well, that's good. Well, you had a chance to rediscover your roots with football a little bit recently. I think the last couple of years you've been out to Vikings training camp in Mankato. And I'm wondering, what was your experience like, and what memories does that bring back when you get back on campus?
Actually, what is it now, 8 years? We started going to training camp when our oldest grandson was a year old, just to take him and let him experience it. Well, he's now 8. And it's quite frankly big fun to go down and see him, to watch him get to experience a little bit of the training camp. It's certainly totally different from when I played. I mean, when I played, we went to training camp at the end of June, so we were down there 8 weeks, if not more. And the Vikings were a team that wasn't there as long as some other teams. I mean, some teams would be there 11, 12 weeks. Mankato was hot. We would have 2-a-day practices every day. We would scrimmage live at least once a day, and sometimes twice a day. And so the camps now are a little bit different. I like to joke with with Jim and Carl on occasion, that if we had the training camps they have today, we could still be playing. Although I think we're well past our sell-by date.
Well, of course, you can't have those off-season jobs like you used to have in the 60s and 70s anymore if you did that.
Well, that's true, and where would you be making $5-6 million a year.
Right. You don't want that. You want to have the job instability. You want to keep on working.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly.
You always seem to be really competitive, not just on the football field, but kind of everything you did. I'm curious, from an NFL standpoint, did you enjoy it at the time and the success you achieved, or was football for you more of a means to an end to get to the next phase of your life and career?
Oh, I love playing football.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the only reason to do it is because you enjoy the sport and the art and the performance. I mean, I can't think of any other reason to do it. I thoroughly enjoyed, the on-field time. There were other parts of it I wasn't real wild about, but in terms of playing and being part of the team, that was something that's experience that you can't buy, that you can't get any other way than to be a part of it.
You were part of that 1969 Viking squad, and they were the first ones to advance to the Super Bowl. And in fact, in the playoff game against the Rams, I think it was the divisional playoff, your interception of NFL MVP quarterback Roman Gabriel was the thing that sealed the game for the Vikings to send you to the NFL championship game. What do you have memories of that game, or even of the two playoff wins that you had that season in Minnesota?
I remember that was a tough game, and we were under pressure the whole time, but because of the great play of, Jim and Carl and Bobby Bryant and Charlie West and a whole host of others, and some points from the offense, we were able to pull it out. And I remember it being cold. I remember not frostbite, but it being, the kind of classic game where you're working and working and working, and the outcome really isn't determined until the final whistle blows. Those kind of games are, when you're done, you're very satisfied when it's over.
When you look at it, I know I've heard this from a lot of players. Some say, how meaningful the games are, but in the end, it's just a game. But when it's your job, you want to do it well. And, obviously you were one of the few people who played on all four Viking Super Bowl teams, but in the end, lost those big games. And I'm curious, was there any one of those games that sticks out in your mind where you said, hey, boy, we had the talent, we should have won that one? And when it gets to you and you start thinking about it, how long does it take for a player to get that out of your mind?
Well, you're right. It is a game, and in the end, whether you win or you lose doesn't change who you are, except for the fact that there is a tendency, you tend to learn more from losing than you do from winning. And I say this noting that I was perhaps one of the worst sports when it comes to losing that ever existed. Not my idea of a good time.
Mm-hmm.
But that said, you go out and you give it your best. You try to perform as well as you can, and some days you win, some days you don't. I think we had the quality of player and team that should have won 3 of the 4 of those games. Turns out we couldn't win any of them. The only one I think we got outclassed was Miami. I mean, we just, that one, we probably, we didn't get run off the field, but that's the one where they were in control and should have been in control. With the rest, we should have done better than we did.
Look out. There they go. They went after him that time. Now the Vikings suddenly fired up. That's their first sack of the game.
When you look at that, I mean, we always talk about this focus, and we saw it in the game with the Dolphins. You get frustrated after making a sack or getting a penalty or something like that. But we've also heard that there was a part of you that was a little bit playful. And the one that comes back, we hope someday that the lost footage surfaces from the Super Bowl IX with the Steelers, where apparently Howard Cosell was interviewing Fran Tarkenton, and we understand you were recruited to help with a prank. Do you recall it, and can you tell the fans about it?
Well, when I look back on it, it wasn't one of my shining moments. It's not one that I actually look on with great pride, let me say. We all make mistakes in life. We all do things that, in hindsight, you think, what was I possibly thinking? and obviously, I wasn't thinking. But we ended up, I can't remember who all was involved, but we ended up pouring a bucket of water off a balcony onto Howard Cosell.
Right.
Like I say, not one of my shining moments.
Yeah, and I understand. There was always that question of, did Howard wear something on his head besides his natural hair? And I think that would have been answered if we ever saw the footage, from what I understand.
Exactly. Hopefully there is no such footage. However,
so what you're saying to us is, if the footage comes up to us, we find it, we're to burn it. Is that correct?
Exactly.
Fair enough. You got a deal from us. And I got to ask you, as you look at the NFL today, I know you don't follow it as closely as you once did, but there are a lot of new rules trying to protect the players. We've talked to Joe Kapp before. He said it was crazy. He said in the 60s, they were already talking about the dangers of the game. He said they considered things as strange as taking the helmets off to keep people from actually leading with their head. And I'm curious, with all those changes, the game seems as violent or more violent than ever. Any ideas from your perspective of what can be done to make this game safer?
I'm not sure I know, short of changing the game. And the reality is that it is a violent sport. It requires people to collide at great velocity. And the human body wasn't designed to withstand some of that kind of thing. And as players continue to get bigger, the impacts will continue to be greater. And I don't know that, short of playing without helmets, that you can really do much. You can change the rules so that, you can't hit the quarterback, but all of a sudden then you're playing pitch and catch, and what fun is that to watch? I don't know that I have the answers.
Well, I know they keep searching for it, and I think, the one thing that you can say about yourself, I know you've talked about it before, you played 218 consecutive games on the way to 148 sacks and 22 fumble recoveries, but you stayed mostly injury-free. But I do know there's one injury, and you're not the only person with it. I have definitely seen it on Roger Staubach when I've talked to him, but you've talked about it in a children's book you wrote with your daughter, and the title for that, if people want to find that, is called Alan and His Perfectly Pointedly Impossibly Perpendicular Pinky, and that's hard to say.
Alan and His Perfectly Pointy, Impossibly Perpendicular Pinky.
See, you just want to make me look bad.
You just have to say it a lot.
Well, my question is, can you describe to people two things? How did the injury occur? What is it? And then what made you and your daughter decide to write a book about it?
Well, early on in my professional football career, I dislocated the pinky on my left hand, making a tackle. I was going one way, the ball carrier was going the other, and I got my hands on his jersey, and I kept going the way I was going, and he kept going the way he was going, and my pinky decided to go with him. It hurt. I wanted to cry, may have cried. Jim Marshall was kind enough, as I was cowering, trying to hold my finger, he was kind enough to ask me, well, I shouldn't say kind enough, but asked me what was wrong. I sort of whimpered and pointed to my pinky, and he said, well, give it to me. And I gave it to him, and he yanked it straight.
Oh.
Which made it hurt even more than it did when it was dislocated. The unfortunate part was whoever the opposing team was by then up to the line of scrimmage, and I had to get back down into my left-handed stance. It hurt. Over the years, I dislocated a number of other times before I finally figured out that if I taped it to the finger next to it, I could prevent it from being dislocated. By then, the damage was done. All the ligaments on the inside of the finger were torn, and so the ligaments on the outside pull it till it's perfectly pointy and perpendicular.
Well, there you go.
Possibly perpendicular.
And I got to think that your daughter asked you about it growing up, and did that lead to her saying, let's write a book about this thing?
Well, what happened for the Foundation's 25th anniversary, Diane said, this is an education foundation. You spend a lot of time with children. We should have you write a book. as a fundraising effort for the 25th anniversary. Well, initially I'm thinking I don't know how to write a book, I don't know how to write a children's book. But then my youngest daughter, who is a second grade teacher and who had worked with me on doing some speech writing, suddenly Alan writing a book became Alan and daughter Tammy writing a book.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about a bunch of ideas and finally ended up settling on Alan and his perfectly pointy, impossibly perpendicular pinky.
So you're going to keep on saying that to make me feel bad that I couldn't quite get it out, aren't you?
Well, and it's I will say the pinky plays a prominent role, but it's really about children, and sometimes we don't give children enough credit. We tend to think that maybe they're, a little too impetuous. They are doing the wrong thing sometimes and asking the wrong question at the wrong time. And the point of the book is to say, let children be curious. Let them be themselves. And we do that in the context of Alan and his perfectly pointy, impossibly perpendicular pinky.
Well, I'll tell you what, and it's still available, guys, on page-ed.org, so you can get it there. It's a really great book, not only for kids, but it's good for parents, too, as they talk to their kids about addressing things that they see on occasion that look different to them and have them address it directly. So it's really great.
Exactly. And we have a second book, The Invisible You, which is a book about... It's not about me. It's not about the pinky. It's about children and their differences and learning and becoming comfortable being placed in different situations. It's about a little boy who starts a new school and is feeling out of place. And, we all feel that.
Whether it's new school or new job.
School, new job, whether we're a child or whether we're an adult.
That's right.
And this was a vehicle for Cammie in her classroom. She said, we don't have a good tool to talk about these kind of things, and so let's write a book about it. And so we wrote The Invisible You.
Well, that's great. And as you look towards that, all of that is going towards all the experiences in life, trying to share back. And for those fans out there who do remember you on the football field, they always want to know, is there one lasting memory that you had or accomplished that you're most proud of achieving in the NFL?
I'm one of those people who, when I look back, I look back on the entire experience, whether it be on the football field or in law. You get that question, well, what was the biggest thing that happened, or who was the best player you played against? Every week there was a new player, there was a new experience, and every week you were going out and trying to perfect as best you humanly could your craft. And so I tend not to look back on it in that way. I look back on the entire experience as something that I thoroughly enjoyed, something that made me who I am today, an important part of who I am today. And no one piece of that overshadows the others.
No doubt. Well, Alan, the last part of our interview today is simply a rapid-fire session. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you one word, and we're looking for either one word or a sentence response from you based on what we give you. Does that sound okay?
Well, let's have at it.
All right. I'm going to start with former defensive line coach Buddy Ryan.
Boy, that's a good one. Genius.
Okay. Carl Eller.
The Moose.
Jim Marshall.
Captain.
Joe Kapp.
Tough.
Former Minnesota Governor Jesse Ventura.
Great judicial appointments.
Bob Lertzema.
Bench warmer.
Okay. Chuck Foreman.
Fast.
Gene Washington.
Smooth.
And finally, Metropolitan Stadium.
Cold.
Well, Alan, I want to thank you for taking the time to reconnect with Viking fans and those who followed your career in the Minnesota Supreme Court.
Well, thank you for having me. I've enjoyed it.
Now, before we go, I want to remind our listeners to strongly consider supporting the Page Educational Foundation. And you can start by learning more at page-ed.org to order your tickets for the 2016 All-Star Gala on September 10th. And you'll get live music there and entertainment in the Viking Club, and you'll meet Alan in person, and plus you'll enjoy that game day food that Alan talked about and participate in the silent auction. And remember, the proceeds for this event directly benefit the Page Scholars in the form of Page Grant. Again, Alan, thanks for joining us to share some of the memories today.
Thank you. This is fun.
Gabriel has it. He throws to Smith. Larry is caught. He had a first down, I think. The ball is loose. The officials have blown it dead. Minnesota Vikings have the football. Alan Page, I believe, was the man that came up with it. Alan Page, who has turned into one of the biggest thieves in the National Football League this year. He is something.
That defense has done it again, and Howard was just talking about the mistakes. You'll see Alan Page again, number 88. He's a great defensive player all around. He puts on a good rush, and he does have a habit of being where that ball is. He's come up with he came up with an interception for a touchdown this year. You'll see him there pick up the fumble.